Absolutely. Well, welcome everyone. This is our conference call on harnessing the gift of conflict with Dr. Lisa Walker. And to give you a little background, Lisa Walker works closely with corporate leaders to help them grow strategically and tactically from a personal and organizational level and perspective. She holds a doctorate in psychology from the University of Texas in Austin and is a Columbia University certified executive coach, as well as a Marshall Goldsmith certified behavioral coach. She served on the faculty of the University of Texas at Austin in the Department of Human Development and currently serves as a mentor at the IC2 Institute at the University of Texas at Austin. Before her work as a leadership development consultant, Lisa practiced as a psychologist specializing in collaborative law and complex type conflict matters for individuals and organizations. She is an advanced level mediator and facilitator. She loves the outdoors as an avid gardener and hiker. She also enjoys running obstacle races, Spartan races, and climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with her husband this past summer. She has a son, Matt, who graduated from college, and a daughter, Chrissy, who's a senior in college. She has been married to Peter, her college sweetheart, for 28 years. And with that, I leave you with Lisa. Thank you.
Thanks, Carlos. I appreciate it. So it's a nice sunny morning in Austin, albeit a little bit cold. It's been very cold the last couple of days, so I'm enjoying the sunshine, though it's a little chilly outside. So as Carlos shared, my background over a decade and a half working in the space of mediation, facilitation, and conflict management. So this is right up my alley. And, all of us as coaches know that many of the situations, the cases that our clients experience, whether individual clients we're coaching, teams we're working with, or the wider organization, quite often a huge part of the work that we're doing is helping our clients navigate relationships. And with all relationships, we can expect to come to be present some amount of conflict. It's just the nature of relationships. And conflict, for us, when we hear the word conflict, there are all kinds of images that are conjured up in the mind, whether it's between the individual, two partners, two business partners, a leader and his team or team members. Conflict is going to show up, and we all have our own images of what that looks like for us. So today we're going to go on a journey, and my thesis that I'm presenting is that conflict isn't always necessarily a bad thing. Our first reaction to it is, wow, this is something for many of us we don't want to deal with. So I'm inviting us to consider another way of looking at conflict as a possibility for opportunities, for opening up opportunities. For conflict to be an opportunity, however, we've got to understand the architecture of conflict. We've got to be able to consider the types of conflicts that are there, the stages of conflict. What are we looking for at different times in a relationship that would suggest that we're at the beginning stages of a conflict, that conflict is brewing, we're now somewhere in the middle, or things have exploded? What are some of the signs to look for? And this is as much for us as individuals, strategies that we can use in our own personal relationships, and absolutely in the workplace. For the purposes of our conversation today, I'll be focusing quite heavily on conflict in the workplace situation. So types of conflict, stages of conflict, then we look at approaches to conflict, and we'll talk a bit also about the advantages and disadvantages of conflict. And then looking at conflict resolution strategies. How do we get to the place of flipping conflict around from a challenge or an obstacle to an opportunity? And I love talking about obstacles. Carlos briefly mentioned that I love to do obstacle races, those crazy Spartan races where you're scaling 12-foot walls or you're crawling in mud under barbed wire an inch from your back. Those are obstacles in life, right? And there are ways in my mind, to allow myself to be able to complete those obstacles. I see them as opportunities for stretching me, pushing me outside of my comfort zone. I was terribly afraid of heights, but doing my Spartan races allowed me to approach many of those obstacles and turn them into opportunities for my own physical and emotional growth. Well, in a similar way, we can look at conflict to say, okay, this is something that's getting in the way of this important relationship or relationships. what can I mine from this opportunity? What gold, what treasure can I pull from this opportunity, from this situation, to turn it into an opportunity for each of us involved? So we're going to be digging a little bit deeper. And first, by taking a look at when conflict really happens. And so I find it very, very helpful in my engagements with my clients to be exploring these issues with them. Quite often, a client may come to me with a situation where they're feeling challenged with a team member or a colleague, but they're not sure exactly what's going on. So understanding the architecture of conflict helps in this way. So first, we're looking at when it happens. Well, conflict happens when there's a disagreement through which the parties involved perceive a threat to their needs, their interests, and their concerns. And I want us to pay particular attention as we continue our conversation this morning about the needs, the interest, or the concerns, because that's where the magic is. When we understand the needs and interests really well and the concerns really well, only then can we have the opportunity to flip conflict on its head and turn it into something positive rather than something negative. I love this little image. I found it some years ago and started using it as an illustration. So we'll see how we're going to. Here are these two donkeys. They're both obviously quite hungry, right? They're going after the food because they're hungry. Yet here they are in a situation 3 feet from gold, or in this case, 3 feet from hay. They're as close as, an inch away from getting the food, but they can't. At the end of our conversation today, we're going to flip this around. We're going to help these two donkeys to figure out how to get a bellyful out of this opportunity and not just to stand there tugging each other one way and the next. So let's dive in a bit. So where conflict happens? Well, conflict happens in every kind and size of group. You name it, between you and your partner, your children, your neighbors, your colleagues, your coworkers, your clients and their teams, your organization. It's happening everywhere. Once we have 2 or more people put together, there's a possibility for conflict, right? And I'm sure as you're thinking, as you're hearing my voice talking about this, you can reflect and think of situations, whether it's current or recent or sometime in the past, where you have found yourself in a situation where conflict was present. We're going to dig a little bit deeper later on to kind of explore how we each approach these conflicts. So they happen to all of us in all kinds of situations. So we just want to set the stage for that. So quite recently, I had the opportunity to do some work with a large company, and they decided to use the Hogan assessment as a way to help their high potentials, as they call them. These are all director level leaders in the organization, get a better understanding of who they are and how they show up. And one area that we spend quite a bit of time exploring is in the area of values. And it was interesting to see these leaders getting a clearer look at who they are at a deeper level, understanding why they show up the way they do in the workplace and in life in general. And for many of them, this was the first time that they were getting a clear understanding of some of their drivers, some of the values that cause them to show up the way they do at work. Many were not aware that hierarchy and structure might have been a huge thing for them. They may not have been fully aware of how much, for example, ambition pushed them to make certain choices, to do certain things they do. And in the same breath, were not fully aware of why they felt so strongly about others, whether it was a colleague, a coworker, a client, whoever. They were not fully aware because they were not aware that they were being strongly driven by certain values, whereas someone that they may be working quite closely with, that value was not a strong driver for them at all. And so what they were experiencing was tension in the relationships, which at times led to conflict. So this opened up the opportunity for us to do some amazing conversation around how self-awareness prepares us, gives us the tools, the insight to show up in relationships more effectively. And when we do so, we are more inclined to examine our own selves, our own values, what drives us, what ticks us off, what excites us, and then we're looking carefully, or I should say, and when we're looking carefully at others and we're getting to understand their values, what drives them, What ticks them off? What excites them? It opens up the opportunity to connect more deeply and reduce the likelihood of misunderstandings and conflicts. So that was an amazing, I would say, sort of a delicious conversation for me to be engaged with all these leaders and to watch them sparkle as their understanding of self was heightened and therefore piqued their interest in understanding others with whom they're working with. So understanding conflict takes awareness. It starts with self-awareness. Working with conflict takes practice. One of the takeaways for the leaders from this workshop was that they now needed to take that self-awareness and be constantly, consistently making shifts in the way they show up so that they're being authentic, that they're being transparent, that they're connecting at a deeper level with the folks with whom they're working in a way to reduce conflict. So developing a healthy approach to conflict is a bit like learning how to maintain a bicycle. That's how I see it, at least. If you regularly oil the chain and adjust the brakes, you can avoid major problems. But you'll need to learn the skills to do these things and also the awareness of when they need to be done. So I say, when we are not fully aware of who we are and how we show up in relationships, it's kind of like walking around in a dark room, and not just that the room is dark because the lights are out, but we also have blindfolders on. And the furniture is strewn all over the room. So we're moving around, we're navigating this room, literally bumping into things because of lack of self-awareness. When we take the blindfolds off, which is, for example, what a deeper conversation or something like an assessment can do, help us to take the blindfolds off. So we see our blind spots. And then as we become aware of ourselves and we start understanding others better, it's like, wow, this room is well lit. I know where every chair and table is, every potted plant in a corner, every person standing or sitting. And so we're avoiding the pitfalls that could potentially lead to problems, challenges such as conflict. So again, bringing our minds back to it, conflict in the workplace. Most of us are working with our clients who are in intense, ever-changing environment where conflict is just the norm. And so we've got to be able to give them the tools to work in those situations. So let's dig a little bit deeper to take a look at some of the types of conflicts. Again, when we understand the architecture, when we understand ourselves well, and we understand the different types of conflicts, then we are much more prepared to navigate them. So here are some of the types of conflicts that we find in workplace. And you all know this, I'm putting it out there just as a reminder so we can pull all this information together to help us all turn conflict into possibilities, opportunities, even gold. So first, relationship conflict, clash of personalities, some say. You see this often. I have leaders share with me challenges they're going through with their colleagues or peers, where someone may constantly interrupt and talk over others in meetings. So that's one type. I'm sure you can identify multitude of ways in which relationship conflicts show up. That's one example. Then there's task conflict, or conflict that results as a result of disagreements over tasks. What are the intended goals of a particular project? It might be disagreement over resource allocation. Had a major situation with two of my leaders in a tech company recently, where one leader felt that she was trying to ensure that her org got all the resources that it needed to roll out this big program at the end of the year. Her colleague felt that she was just focused on her needs only and not the wider organization. And so that led to an intense situation between them. So that's a task-focused conflict. Then there's process, a disagreement over how to carry out a project or task. We may see one leader being concerned about rolling out the initiative early. Someone else may be waiting for this to be perfectly done. We see this all the time with our folks, and they may have a disagreement over process. If they're not aware that it's process, they may be thinking that this is a relationship issue when it's not, or it might be a task issue when it's not. Then there might be this conflict as a result of status. Who's in charge? Who gets the credit for the work? Folks may be competing for high stakes clients or for a project, and they want their name to be associated with this because that's important to them. So is it a status conflict, or something else. So many different categories. So let's dig a little bit deeper in relationship conflict. Quite often when we hear about conflict in the workplace, for many folks, we first go to relationship. It's something about these folks and their relationship that's not working. We often think it's a clash of personalities. You know, she's an extrovert, he's an introvert. That's the reason for the issue. It might just be a personal disagreement, right? And if we're not digging deeper, we won't get there. We may just leave it as these two can't work together because of personalities, when it's really just an interpersonal or emotional conflict. They may be snapping at each other, avoiding eye contact, arguing, about who's right or who is wrong, because they haven't done the necessary work to understand what's underneath that. And we're going to be talking about what that work could look like, possibly even should look like, to help and support our clients getting out of this glitch. Relationship conflict typically starts with something else. I guarantee you that, having spent so many years in this space, each and every time I work with a client or an organization, it's about something else. They disagree over something, things don't get addressed, stuff strewn under the rug, covered up, avoided. When we get to the heart of the matter, we find out that there is something else going on. And when we can address that, we free our clients of the tension and the discontent that comes from the perception that this is a relationship conflict. It might be different of a strategy that they then attach to personality and say it's about relationships. So let's move further. There are few benefits to workplace relationship conflict because ego gets in the way. And so for us as coaches to help our clients differentiate and not get stuck on that this is about relationship, it's like granting them something amazing, because when we say that this can be solved, it's not because she's a bad person or he's a bad person. It's what are these underlying issues? Let's help you get there so you can get out of that stuck place. Positive outcomes achieved when participants take the opportunity to learn more about themselves and about each other. Remember, I mentioned earlier about the self-awareness and about taking off the blindfold in that dark room and turning the lights on. That's what's necessary to help us move away from this is all about relationship to something more tangible and practical that we can actually work on. The most common source of disagreement that we see at the workplace is task conflict over what to be done or how it should be done. A dispute over the goal of a task or the project or what you're trying to achieve. Quite often, there isn't clarity around this. And when there isn't clarity, it sets us up, it sets our clients up or organizations up for a lot of tension, right? We may see marketing, legal, and finance looking at the same rollout, but looking at it differently because they're coming from a different perspectives. Their particular org have different needs. So the leaders in those organizations will have different needs as well. Marketing may want to put customers first, legal protecting the company from risk, and finance is focusing on the bottom line. In the end, though, this is all about the organization. And when we're able to get these different individuals, different leaders with different perspectives and different thoughts and different needs together, and open up their individual needs to the needs of the organization, we're able to pull them away from being stuck in this place of conflict. All their needs, when each of those goals are met, in the end, the organization's goals will be met if it's managed well. So is it a task, a conflict related to task, relationship? We've got to dig and figure that out. Positive outcome is achieved when we have productive discussions about our different views of project goals and how we should define success. So if marketing defines success only in marketing terms, and legal defines success only in legal terms, and finance only in finance, you see where I'm going with this, then we're going to be stuck, right? So success for each of these leaders would have to be opened up. The definition of it would have to be opened up a bit to embrace success for each of the other, focused on the overall organization's success. And when we're able to get our clients to see that, that means they may have to give a little, in what it is that they need out of this discussion, then you need to give a little. However, this will take them to a place of reducing the conflict and many, many times flipping that conflict over into an opportunity. I would imagine all of us see sometimes great opportunities for our leaguers to be working cross-org. And we are the ones who at times will have to engage them in conversations to have them see those possibilities rather than simply focus on the needs of their group, their team, or for them as an individual. So that's what
muted.
We move to. The conflict could be about the process. So many times I'm sitting with my clients, and as he or she's sharing, and they're sharing intense situations like this, I'm beginning to think about, okay, what am I hearing here? What are some of the key things I'm hearing that will help me help my clients figure out, is this a process or a task-oriented conflict? So this one would be a disagreement over how to carry out a project or task, the means or process to use to reach the goal, the strategy for rolling out a new initiative, for example. Who should be consulted? Who should be included? Process disagreements are easily confused with task conflicts. You think you're arguing over the outcome when really you can't agree on how to make a decision. And that may seem like a minor nuance. In the end, you guys all know that this is a huge deal. And when our clients see this and they make that distinction, and when the doors open up for them to get the work done and to get out of this place of tension and conflict, it is an amazing thing to experience. Positive outcome is achieved by drawing on the expertise of the whole group. So it's asking questions. It's especially asking questions for which you don't have the answer. You've got to rely on the other person to share with you what they are thinking, even at times what they are feeling. What does my intuition say about this based on the facts that I have, and my experience in this area? So it opens it up for that. Disagreement over how to get something done can bring about process improvements. It can even unearth hidden benefits. So just the opportunity to explore what's going on here, to explore the options, to put them all on the table, and see what may work and why it may work, could open up great opportunities. And so the key here is distinguishing process conflict from task conflict. They're closely related, and quite often our clients are thinking of them as one and the same. And when they are, it's going to take a much longer time for them to resolve whatever this issue is. So understanding that and helping them to walk through or to navigate that is really important. Then we have status. Not always a big one, less common, but still problematic, and we should all be aware of it. And it's something that I had to work with one of my clients with last week, because there was an issue on hierarchy. The source of the conflict is when people disagree over their standing within a group. Disagreement about who's in charge and who gets the credit and who will get the spotlight for this. You think you should be leading an initiative while your colleague feels that was already endowed on them. That was already their thing to be doing. So you find folks jockeying for leadership, especially in a team without a formal or designated leader. I can think of a current situation with a leader of mine, a VP in a major tech company, and it so happens that I'm coaching both clients, and one was just promoted to VP and the other is still senior director. Well, the one who is still senior director is in a place of distrust and anger right now, and we're working through that. He felt that the work he did on a major project earlier this year should have been made the final decision for his manager, easy to make, about him being the one promoted to VP level. Now, he wasn't thinking about a lot of the other factors that were involved in that decision. He was just thinking about the work he did, what it did for his org, and for him, it felt unfair that his colleague is now in the position of VP and he will have to be reporting to her. So that's something that we've got to be working through. And so a lot of the issues that he's facing right now, he's interpreting things through the lens that he's wearing right now around this hierarchical issue. And so as he's sharing issues and concerns with me, there are times when I've got to ask him questions that will lead him right back to exploring the relationship, the status issue that he's challenged by right now, and how that might be affecting current decisions that he needs to make. So status, while not as common as, for example, process or task, is still something that we ought to be aware of. And quite often, these appear as sort of silent issues. They're underneath what our client is presenting. And as we ask those deep explorative questions, we're able to see some of this coming to the surface and help our clients explore, is this an issue? Is this part of the problem? Or is this the problem that we need to be exploring? When conflict results from status issues, positive outcome is achieved from clearing up the hierarchy and, being clear about who does what, who owns what responsibility, and where collaboration and coordination is necessary. Not an easy task, especially when someone's trust has been broken and folks are still dealing with their own personal hurt. But this is a great place to start to help get things back on track. So let's recap. So far, we've talked about the types of conflicts, and we saw that we can break them down into categories, and there might be more categories. I guarantee you there might be more. For today's purposes, we're looking at relationship conflict, task conflict, process conflict, and status conflict, right? And how these show up with our clients and the organizations within which we provide services. So now let's look at stages of conflict. And the reason I'm inviting us to consider stages is that sometimes as coaches, when we start an engagement with a client, they could be at the beginning stages of a conflict situation. They might be in the middle, they might be at the end. And our strategy for supporting them in navigating these conflicts, in understanding these conflicts, might be a little bit different if they're at the very beginning as compared to when they're at the end. So for years, when I did collaborative law as a facilitator with a lot of major law firms here in Austin, quite often we were at the end stage of the conflict situation. So the strategies I had to support the clients and the lawyers and provide for myself in that situation, they were quite different from the strategies where the relationship was just being initially impacted by conflict. I'd always say we've got to bring out the bigger tools, but by the time we're sitting with 5-6 lawyers around a table with two leaders of an organization trying to figure things out. So we're going to dive a bit into the stages of conflict. So we now know from research and from anecdotal evidence, and I would invite you to think about your own situation with clients you've worked with, or even in your own personal life. Because as I go through this, I'm always reminded of things that I'm working through in my own relationships, whether it's an issue I'm facing with one of my kids or with my husband or the family member. This is always helpful to have in the back of our mind so we can retrieve the tools as we need them. So what we've found is that quite often there's a discomfort. We notice something, we feel something. Some of us are more intuitive, and we may pick up a little something in the air. You walk into the office and something just feels different. You don't know what it is. Then there's incident. Then there's misunderstanding. There's tension. And then we get to crisis. So I spent a lot of time in my career working in the places where there's tension, and quite most often in the place where there's crisis. So we're going to go in a little bit just to uncover some of this so that for us, as we're sitting down with our clients, these things can become more salient to us. So the discomfort is really something, quite often it's a little niggle that tells you conflict might be brewing. It might be a cold shoulder. You can't put your finger on really what's going on, but you just feel a little bit of discomfort. I always say I use emotional intelligence material a lot in the work that I do, because I am a firm believer in self-awareness and being aware of your emotions, being able to label them, and then being able to manage them effectively is the greatest foundation, I believe, for managing relationships. So this little discomfort, when you are aware of self, it's telling you a lot. It might be that you just feel uncomfortable each time you walk in that room, and you've got to notice that and say, what is this about? Then the next thing that shows up quite often is the incident, that something is different here. Somebody you've been working with for a long time, you're just not seeing eye to eye at all. It could be a short, sharp exchange that you have with that person in a meeting, or some maybe cutting you off in the meeting, right? And it's an opportunity to pause and say, what is going on here? And this might be the time to pull a colleague, a coworker, a direct report, a manager, whoever it is, aside. Say, I'm noticing something. Are you noticing? What are you noticing on your end? Open it up, an open-ended question like that. Share what you're noticing and ask for what they're noticing. And they may or may not be noticing what you're noticing. However, you're starting the conversation early to see if you can manage this incident early before it gets into something bigger. And quite often that something bigger may lead to a misunderstanding. The situation escalates to a degree that both parties begin to have false assumptions about each other. Because we know that quite often where we go, when we're sensing something and we don't have all the information, what do? Our brain allows us to start making up stories, right? So we make up stories, we create assumptions, and then we start creating stories about what this person may be thinking, feeling, and perhaps what next they're going to do. And when we find ourselves in this place, this is a sure sign for us that we've got to stop and try to figure things out. So if we can apply this to ourselves, can you imagine the great support that we provide for our clients when they're showing up with these concerns, and we're able to help them by pausing here and start developing a strategy how we're going to be approaching this person or this group to ensure that we can address the situation here while it is still a misunderstanding before it goes to something even more intense, where communication breaks down, emotions are running high, there could be outbursts, people are behaving out of character. And for our clients, this gets in the way. It shuts down productivity, people are withdrawn, it affects folks at a personal level, emotionally and physically. It has a ripple effect in groups. We see that all the time. Two team members may not be getting along, or a leader may be in an intense situation with one of the direct reports, and others in the group, they're experiencing this as well. So by the time our clients get to this situation, if we, for example, we start an engagement and this is a part of it, then we've got to be more, or approach has got to be more urgent, let's say, than if it was just a minor irritation, because the next move from this is really, or clients are in crisis mode. You know, I normally say by the time we get to this place, we are deflecting, we are pulling out our swords, we're in defense and attack mode. And our job as coaches, I believe, is when in a conflict situation, is to really help our clients not to get to this place. This is a breaking point for a lot of relationships in the workplace. Communications will shut down, productivity shut down, and only a couple of times in my career so far, I've experienced this where this had gotten into physical altercation, which is as bad as it gets. So yes, intense situation for our clients. I mean, just thinking about it for me just now and having the image of two of my clients where this happened is a little flashback that I don't even appreciate for myself personally. So I can just imagine for my clients. And I bet you can imagine as well for your clients who may have had situation brewing for a while, and had they taken some early initial steps, it would not take them to this place, and the cost for the individuals and for the organization would not have had to risen to the place that it got to. And we all know that this is very costly for our clients. From a relational perspective, from a health perspective, absolutely, we can't even put a dollar sign on that. We can, however, put a dollar sign on how conflict impacts the workplace and productivity, right? And a lot of our clients, organizations, they understand this. So when we extend to them this opportunity to work through, whether it's through one-on-one coaching, through workshops, webinars, training, whatever, they understand that this is going to be something that clears up a lot for them. So it's a moment for pause. I'd say if we could plot a conflict that we've been involved in, any of us here, I bet we could see those stages. I bet we could see the little irritation, then the misunderstanding, right? We go from one to the next to the next. And if we haven't taken care of business earlier on, we get ourselves to a place where this is a full-blown crisis. So what's next? We've got to figure out the approaches that will help us and help our clients navigate this more effectively. You know, disagreements do not have to swell into something more unpleasant. We're all different people with different opinions, different wants, and different needs. And that's why we often see things differently. And there is a way out of this. Thomas Kilmann, who has done a tremendous amount of work in the conflict space, has a model that I use quite often. I've been using it for years with my clients to understand how we show up. And each of us here, as we think about ourselves and we think of conflict situations that we found ourselves in, can pretty quickly figure out, you know, where we fall in this model. So what's our preferred style that is? For all of us, we're going to show up with some of these styles from one situation to the next. But generally speaking, we have a preferred mode of approaching conflict. For some, it's competition, trying to win, standing up for our own positions and our rights. For others, it's avoidance. I don't like the feeling of this. I have a lot of my clients who say this to me. Don't like it, don't want to do that. Then there is accommodation, yielding to another's point of view, right? When yielding to another's point of view, obeying an order when you don't want to. This approach is effective when the other party is an expert or has a better solution, but it isn't always the best way to go. It can be effective for preserving future relationships with the other party. So that's a good part about accommodation. We've got to know how to use it and how to use it carefully. Then there is collaboration. This is where you partner or pair up with the other party to achieve both goals for both of you. This is how we break free of the win-lose paradigm and seek the win-win. And this can be effective for complex scenarios where you need to find a novel solution. So when I practiced collaborative law, this was a go-to for us. We had to figure out how to bring two parties who sometimes couldn't even stand to be in the same room together, much less sit around the same conference table. We had to figure out how to get them to a place to collaborate in order to get the work done. And the model that is most effective in this is really to get to the heart of people's interests and their concern. I'll go in that a little bit deeper in a moment. But this involves a great deal of work identifying the interests, then generating options, then exploring those options, and then reaching a consensus that makes sense for others, for the other party. Then there's compromise. This is the lose-lose scenario where neither party really achieves what they want. This requires a moderate amount of assertiveness and cooperation. Folks have to be able to work together in this. It may be appropriate for scenarios where you need a temporary solution or where both sides have equally important goals. The trap is to fall into compromising is an easy way out. A lot of folks go there, but it's an easy way out when collaborating would produce better solutions. So collaborating here is the piece that takes more time. It's a lot more work because you're digging deep, you're understanding interests, you're understanding values, you're exploring options. Yet that's where the gold is in conflict resolution, conflict management, and I dare say flipping conflict into opportunity. And so both sides can get what they need out of it. So when you think of your own self, your preferred approach to conflict resolution, or as you're thinking about clients that you're currently working with, is it about competition? I've got to win. Is it about avoidance, avoiding conflict? It doesn't keep the peace. It keeps the turmoil trapped inside. So that's something to think about as that comes up. Is it about collaboration? Is that your own preferred choice or approach? Is that what you are seeing in a particular client that you're working with right now, where you know that conflict is a huge part of what they're trying to navigate? Is it about accommodating everyone, the know-it-alls, the passive, the dictators, the yes people, the no people, the gripers? Is it about accommodating? Is it about compromising? Just a moment of thought for each of us. What is your preference style? So I'd invite all of us to really, as we do this work and as we think about or approach with our clients as well, we invite ourselves and invite our clients to do the individual assessment, figure out our preferred style or inclination, then compare it with individuals, especially individuals with whom we are working closely or our clients are working closely, and we're seeing certain approaches showing up, certain styles. What's their style and how do I need to accommodate for that so that we're reducing conflict and at the same time working to turn conflicts into opportunities? We've got to expand our repertoire of conflict management skills in order to do this well. And again, the great end product or result of this is us getting so much better in relationships. So again, what is your preferred approach to conflict? What's your closest partner's preferred approach to conflict? Your client number 1, number 5, number 10, what's their approach to conflict? What are the stories that they have brought to you that conflict may be at the core or on the fringes, and if not managed well, could become something bigger? What are you noticing as you're asking questions and they're showing up that you could help them discover their approach and how that approach might be helping them to resolve conflict or intensifying the conflict that they're experiencing? Shirzad Shameen, in his book Positive Intelligence, an amazing book by the way, talks about the iceberg of conflict. And I love this because this captures beautifully the approach in collaborative law that is used to help clients collaborate, get to the heart of the matter, and resolve their issues. Walk away may not always be feeling great about the outcome, but at least feeling good about how they navigated the process and satisfied with the results. So when folks are in conflict, we all tend to have positions. We take a position on a certain thing. And so consider the position, the tip of the iceberg. That's all we see. This person wants this, and that's what they need out of this situation, right? If we stay at the position, then we're staying in opposition to the other person. And this is where conflict lives. Charmaine says that the problem with position is that they almost always create automatic opposition. For every position, there's an opposite one. Conflict lives at the position level and is rarely resolved there. At this level, one part or the other needs to give up its own position entirely, or the two need to meet somewhere in between, which would result in each feeling they had compromised, right? So what do we do? How do we help ourselves and our clients? Well, we've got to check out the assumptions. We've got to start checking the assumptions. And as we do that, we might find that, we've been wrong all along, or that we've misread someone's intentions. Misreading intentions is a common source of conflict. People's positions are often fed by underlying assumptions, and these often include many assumptions about the other party's intentions. And even as a person who I consider myself an expert in this area, I've done this work for so many years. I've been humbled by my own slip-ups at times where I incorrectly assess somebody else's needs and intentions, and have to humble myself and pause and dig deeper to figure out what's going on before we can move forward. When we dig a little bit deeper, then we go to aspirations. And I'd say aspirations / interests. What do we want? Where do we see ourselves going? The underlying aspirations and interests that feed our positions, they hold the key to harvesting the gift of conflict. It's an automatic human response to oppose another person's rigid position, right? That's just something that happens. We're wired to do that. but we're also wired to champion other individuals' deeply felt aspirations, their interests, their deepest needs. And when we get to that place, when we understand people's aspirations and their needs, we're much more likely to open up and figure out, how can I help this person? There's a lot of common ground here. I can relate to that. How can I help them address their needs? So the next time, my invitation is the next time you're with a client, or this is personally applicable, that you're in this situation, pause, check the assumptions. What's going on? What are the needs here that are not being met? What are the needs here that are not being met? And that's going to open things up. Another secret, and these are strategies that I'm sharing that I've found to be super successful in helping my clients navigate, is shifting the tense. Rather than focusing on the past or the present, shift to the future. The future is choice and opportunity, and it takes us there and it takes the other party there. This creates the opportunity to co-create and to resolve the conflict in the future. So the past is about blame. The present quite often is about values. What's driving me underneath that? When we can pull away from the past and the present and think about the future, it now becomes about choice. It's about, so what are the options and what can I do? So for example, when we are stuck in a place of blame, it's, you could be, say, for example, sitting in the family room, reading books and watching television with your partner, and your partner says, could you turn the music down for me? If you're, from a blame place, you'd say, well, either that's the volume you set it at, or you're closer to it, right? That's a blame. If we're in the values place, we could, oh my gosh, you don't like my music? You want me to turn it down because you don't like my music? If we shift to the future or the choice place, it could sound something like, sure, I'd be happy to turn the music down, but is it the music that's too loud, or would you prefer for me to play something else? See the slick little move there? Immediately shifting into choice, into the future. And from a cognitive perspective, from a neurological perspective, what does that do? That's a stroke to the person. And so if they, for a moment, was residing in that amygdala, that emotional place, you shift them, you've given them a little bit of endorphin, a little bit of feel good, by opening it up to the options, the choices, and not residing in blame or values. So that's a mouthful right there. So shifting quickly in the interest of time, what are some of the benefits of conflict in the workplace? Well, there are a lot. And using the framework of emotional intelligence, when we look at the different subscales that help us as individuals and help our clients show up more effectively, we see that when we're able to understand ourselves well, understand others well, that we are communicating more effectively, we're managing self, we're managing relationships more effectively, we're seeing folks more satisfied, more comfortable in their skin at work, in the way they interact with others, in the way they do their work. So starting from awareness to self-management, to awareness of others, and then managing those relationships gives us the tools and the perspective and helps us manage an approach that allows us to navigate conflict more effectively. So some of the positive outcomes are, conflict helps people find common ground. It teaches people about the negotiation style that works and what works and what doesn't work. It's an opportunity to learn about your partner, your coworker, friend, family member. It's an opportunity to be creative and to stretch and to find solutions that are outside your comfort level and scope of thinking. It often ends in a win-win solution for all involved. It's an opportunity to open up communication on difficult subjects. Timing the tactful conversation about conflict strengthens relationship. It builds trust, improves well-being and productivity. We have study after study showing all these. Managing conflict appropriately helps build independence. A leader can give their team space to work because they feel confident that they will, because they're managing the relationship so effectively. It encourages people to grow. So harnessing the gift, a T should be there, of conflict. Embrace conflict for what it is. It's natural, it's healthy. If a team can open up, honest, and respectful disagreement to achieve their common goal, that is a sign of a very strong team and a very strong leader. The results of conflict can be stronger, self-managed teams, improved processes, improved strategies, better outcomes, and closer relationships. A lot of benefits. Conflict isn't a problem. It's an opportunity. Look at my donkeys. Look at them now. They figured it out. They realized that all the stretching and hee-hawing and butting was never going to get them to the food that they needed. So what did they do? They thought about it. They got together. They self-assessed. They figured each other's style. They figured out each other's need. What's our interest here? Our common interest is to be fed. They explore the options. If we keep pulling from one to the next, we're not going to get this food. So where are they now? Fed and looking well. So harnessing the gift of conflict is an opportunity for all of us. And that's it for now. Carlos?
I would like to say, I don't think we have time for questions, but I would like to say, Lisa, that is a fantastic presentation. Thank you very much for sharing your time and these ideas with us. I am sure that there are many in the group that would like to receive a copy of this presentation. Do you think that's possible?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, if you can send that to Patty, and then she can share it with participants, and we will move forward on that. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and I hope you have found as much value as I did in this presentation. And I wish everyone a fantastic evening, and the most of all to you, Doctor.
Thanks, Carlos. Thanks, everyone, for listening. I'll be sure to send this off to Patty later. Thank you.